South Korea is a global leader in the so-called unmanned industries, but there are growing concerns that such technology will take jobs from workers as more and more tasks will be done by machines. Shin Se-min reports.
They're at hospitals, banks, and now at your nearest fast food chains. These unmanned self-service systems, or kiosks, continue to pop up in different industries.
The convenience makes me want to use them over and over. Mostly, they cut back my waiting time.
I enjoy ordering through automated machines, especially when I'm in a hurry or don't want to talk to the cashier myself.
Large companies are convinced that automation helps them save money on labor cost while catering to the demands of their young customers. In the U.S., Wendy's plans to replace its order-taking employees with digital alternatives by adding kiosks at 1,000 locations across the country this year. This following suit of other fast food chains that have either already installed or are planning to expand the number of self-ordering kiosks. So far in Korea, major fast food chains have not quite inched in this direction, saying no job cuts have been made after setting up the digital machines. The move toward automation isn't all about cutting back on labor cost, as it also enhances labor productivity. But still, people are worried. This speedy and easy-to-use technology may simply look like a step forward in greater efficiency. But along with this rapid expansion of this automated kiosk also comes the concerns that they're stealing people's jobs. The World Economic Forum predicts that nearly 5.1 million jobs will be lost to automation over the period of 2015 to 2020.
All right, let's get grounded. In the San Francisco Bay Area, a pair of self-driving buses are getting ready to hit the streets. How about this, Anne-Marie? Can you get behind this one?
That's definitely my speed.
Okay, unlike some driverless cars, these buses won't have a human operator behind the wheel or a steering wheel at all. Each of the $250,000 buses can carry 12 passengers. They're going to undergo testing in empty parking lots for the next few months. I don't mind a test in these types of situations. They're expected to be on public roadways by the end of the year.
You know what's so interesting about these things is that, people are looking forward to it, but AAA did a whole study on this, and 50% of the people say that they are terrified at the prospect of other people in self-driving cars being on the road.
But I'll be fine.
But they would love their car to be itself. I thought that's so typical.
This thing could someday be your primary transportation, and that could mean bye-bye to traffic jams. On Wednesday, Ital Design unveiled a car concept it's working on with Airbus. Yes, the plane manufacturer. You can see where this is going. It's called the Pop-Up. Here's how it works. Say you're stuck in a traffic jam in one of Ital Design's vehicles. A drone will show up overhead, latch onto the passenger compartment of the car, pick it up, and take off. The bottom part of the car will stay on the ground. Its self-driving technology will hypothetically take it to a charging station while its former operator buzzes around in what is now effectively a helicopter. Drivers will share cars and hail them, kind of like the way we hail ride-sharing services now. It could still be a while before anyone's buzzing around in a self-driving smart copter. The company's just unveiled the concept, and each separate component, drones, self-driving cars, ride-sharing, is still tied up in some amount of regulatory red tape.
Scientists are closer than ever to recreating complex life forms out of completely synthesized DNA. An international group of scientists announced Thursday that they've managed to build 30% of the chromosomes in yeast, the stuff used in baking or beer brewing. The scientists build the new chromosomes using the same 4 chemical bases that make up all DNA. If they manage to meet their year-end goal, it will be a first for complex cells. The scientists are hoping they can use a fully synthetic genome to test evolutionary questions. One of the scientists working on the project told NPR yeast could be developed that might be able to produce new drugs or make more, quote, useful products for us. There are a lot of ethical issues when it comes to editing genes, but the study's lead scientists say there's nothing to worry about. If killer mutant yeast were a real possibility, nature would have already made it by now.
A new study on the world's first genetically modified ants has shown that ants' sociality depends greatly upon their sense of smell. The results of the study provide valuable clues into the social behavior that has evolved in these insects. This project was the first time anyone has succeeded in genetically modifying ants for a study. Laurent Keller, an evolutionary biologist at the University of Lausanne in Switzerland, explained that social insects are especially hard to genetically modify. Even if scientists can modify the genome of an individual, the eggs of ants are very sensitive and difficult to raise without workers, so it's difficult to get a genetically modified egg to survive. The successful results of the project could be important for assessing how brains evolve to manage the complex behaviors seen in social animals, another key aspect of the evolution of sociality in ants and other species.
New research out of Harvard is speculating that a mysterious phenomena called fast radio bursts could be evidence of advanced alien technology. According to a news release by the Harvard-Smithsonian Center for Astrophysics, scientists suspect that these bursts might be leakage from planet-sized transmitters powering interstellar probes in distant galaxies. As one of the researchers, Abe Loeb, has said, fast radio bursts are exceedingly bright, given their short duration and origin at great distances, and we haven't identified a possible natural source with any confidence. An artificial origin is worth contemplating and checking. The release explains that fast radio bursts are millisecond-long flashes of radio emission. First discovered in 2007, fewer than 24 have been detected by gigantic radio telescopes. They are inferred to originate from distant galaxies, billions of light years away.
I gotta figure out how to grow 4 years worth of food here, on a planet where nothing grows.
Astronaut Mark Watney might have been onto something. The International Potato Center, yes, that's a thing, sponsored an experiment to see if spuds can grow on Mars. Turns out, they probably can. Researchers planted a potato in a sealed container simulating Mars's climate. They used dirt from a Peruvian desert deemed the most Mars-like soils found on Earth, and potato sprouts started growing in less than a week. Beyond determining if taters could grow on Mars, researchers wanted to know if they could also grow in extreme climates on Earth. The United Nations reports about 795 million people globally were undernourished in 2015. That number is down from previous years, years, but climate change could reverse that trend. Ocean acidification, rising temperatures, land degradation, and other effects can make it hard to grow crops and raise animals like we do now. And global food demand is growing. That's not to say growing potatoes on the red planet will solve global famine, but it could be a step in the right direction if the effects of climate change aren't reversed or halted. The next phase of the Potatoes on Mars project is finding out which kinds of tubers grow best.
I am the greatest botanist on this planet.
In South Sudan, the United Nations warned that hundreds of thousands of people are facing starvation as the world's newest nation experiences famine. Well, the UN estimates that by July, 50% of the population will be without a reliable source of food. Aid agencies are making airdrops in the worst-hit parts.
After days of waiting, the UN plane finally arrived. It airdropped food aid in Leah County, one of the two areas in South Sudan's unity state classified as being in famine.
I've been here for 4 days in order to receive food. Today I finally got my food and I'm very happy.
Famine is largely man-made. War has totally disrupted agriculture in this country where most people are farmers. South Sudan became independent in 2011. But 2 years later, it plunged into civil war when President Salva Kiir fired his deputy Riek Machar. A peace deal was signed in 2015, but fighting resumed last year. Hundreds of thousands of people fled their homes, and many others now face starvation.
Well, amidst all this, the United Nations now says droughts have become the new normal due to climate change and that countries should now look into ways of cushioning themselves.
The hospital in Baidoa is overwhelmed. It's receiving more than 20 diarrhea cases a day. The epidemic is compounding the plight of people here, already suffering drought. Doctors say 14,000 people have fallen ill in the last 3 months. More than 200 have died, including 2 of Fatima Muhammad Noor's children. 7 others are fighting for their lives.
There's been no rain for the last 3 years. My concern now is no longer about our livestock. They've all died. It's about my children now hanging between life and death.
Most patients are in a critical condition as they are brought from distant areas. The capacity of the hospital is too small to handle the growing number of patients.
Most of the patients are simple farmers with no understanding of the disease, so they can't detect it in its early stages, and they come here when it's too late. We do our best anyway, but we are afraid the epidemic may spread to wider areas. We need medicines and more adequate means to deal with the crisis.
Most patients come from the outskirts of the city of Baidoa, the capital of the southwestern state. Living conditions here are tough, with long queues just to get drinking water. Humanitarian relief rarely reaches this area. The local government has warned that if no international effort is made to help, the situation in southwestern Somalia could become out of control.
Tonight, though, let's start in Egypt. Annual urban consumer price inflation in the North African state has soared to its highest level in more than 3 decades, hitting 30.2% in February. Now, this is the 4th consecutive jump since the central bank abandoned its currency peg to the US dollar in early November. Since then, the Egyptian pound has depreciated by roughly half. Economists say rising inflation will obviously erode spending power, choke off economic growth, and it might prompt further interest rate hikes. Benchmark rates in the North African state are already high at 15.75%. Egypt's central bank, however, has held it at that level since November's float. But some analysts predict some hikes are in the offing. The central bank's rate-setting committee meets next on the 30th of March.
The rise of inflation in Ethiopia has been about 0.9% increase compared to what was registered last month. Authorities at the Ethiopian Statistics Agency said the inflation has caused the fast rise of prices in the country. The effects of the rise in the inflation levels are visible across the capital, Addis Ababa. Residents say they are feeling the burden on their day-to-day lives.
The burden is more than one could imagine. It's hard to sustain one's family mostly in these situations. In small outside markets we used to buy cheaper items, but now the price rise cannot allow you to buy what you need. There is a huge hike.
Our biggest complaint is on vegetables. Look, even the price of tomato has risen unfairly. From 5 birr, we now pay 35 birr, and sometimes even 38 birr. How do you survive if this continues? That is what should be thought about.
Apart from the effects of inflation, people here have also been affected by rapid rise in the cost of consumer goods. A study by Ethiopian Ministry of Trade has revealed that merchants across the country have been hoarding commodities in stores. This has created an artificial shortage of supplies, which in turn has caused a sharp price rise.
장관으로 이 사건을 심리하여 결정하는데 헌법과 40박스의 분량에 이릅니다. 대한민국 국민 모두 아시다시피
싸우지 마세요.
Now people have taken to the streets in the Indian capital, New Delhi, protesting recent racial attacks on their fellow countrymen in the United States. And demonstrators denounced the Indian government for adopting what they consider a lenient approach regarding these hate attacks. Our correspondent Shahana Butt has more.
Holding placards and shouting slogans against the recent racial attacks on Indians in the United States, students from India's top universities and colleges gathered near the U.S. Embassy in New Delhi. The students demanded that the government take a firm approach in response to the attacks.
We want Indian government should give a strong message to American governments, say that this is intolerable, this could not be tolerated.
Demonstrators also accused Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi and US President Donald Trump of disseminating politics of hatred across the globe.
The Daily Beast reports that on Tuesday night, the Boston-based LGBT veterans organization OutVets announced on its Facebook page that the South Boston Allied War Veterans Council had voted 9-4 to deny them entry into the 2017 South Boston St. Patrick's Day Parade. The ban comes just 2 years after the South Boston Allied War Veterans Council ultimately decided to allow OutVets to march in the 2015 parade, after 2 decades of quarreling over the inclusion of LGBT groups. And now that the council has changed course so suddenly, they are once again facing the wrath of Boston. Corporate sponsor Anheuser-Busch said they were re-evaluating their participating in the event, and grocery chain Stop & Shop went a stage further and canceled their sponsorship. The Teamsters Local 25 union also announced they're not marching, and the parade's Army veteran Grand Marshal resigned. A man was arrested after injuring 5 people with an axe at Dusseldorf's main train station late Thursday, police said, correcting earlier reports of 2 arrests. A spokeswoman for Dusseldorf police told the AP that the man arrested was also injured. Earlier, a spokesman for federal police, who are usually in charge of policing train stations, had said 2 people were arrested and further attackers might be on the run. Officers are searching the station and its surroundings, but that they do not have concrete information about further attackers at this stage.
Shooting fatalities have risen sharply in Sweden. Statistics reveal shootings that have resulted in fatalities have doubled in the last 9 years. In 2008, the number of fatal shootings was 14. The figure rose to 22 in 2013 and 31 in 2015. Interior Minister Anders Ygeman said there would be a new bill ready to be voted on by the summer that will seek to reform current gun laws. He said he was raising the penalty for serious gun crimes to 2 years, so it becomes mandatory detention.
These pictures, uploaded to social media, show the Kurdish-led Syrian Democratic Forces close to ISIL's Raqqa stronghold. They've been advised by US Special Forces, but now they'll receive more direct American support. 400 Marines have arrived in the country, ready to set up artillery positions. From 32 kilometres away, they can hit ISIL targets and clear the way for a full-on offensive due to start in weeks.
We are going to prepare to liberate the city of Raqqa. This is an important task that has to be accomplished because liberating that city is going to severely damage the enemy's prospects. It has a tremendous amount of symbolic importance. It's also a major command and control node for their external operations.
The Americans are pulling together local forces to throw a net around Raqqa to kill or capture as many militants as possible. This, they hope, will decimate ISIL and prevent its regeneration elsewhere.
Once you get Raqqa and Mosul, basically ISIS is no longer a military threat. Now, they're still a threat because, as we've seen what they've done in Afghanistan this week, there's still going to be a threat you're going to have to deal with, but it's not going to be a major military threat to the integrity of Iraq or to Syria.
The increase in US troop numbers doesn't indicate a change in US policy in the region under President Trump. The US military insists the Marines are in Syria for a temporary period, but there is no fixed timescale. Meanwhile, President Trump, who said on the campaign trail he had a secret plan to defeat ISIL, has received recommendations from his military leaders on how to defeat and decimate the group. Those recommendations may change, depending on the outcome in Raqqa.
The Turkish army has pounded positions of Syrian soldiers in the flashpoint Syrian city of Manbij. A Syrian military source said the shelling targeted border guards. Attack claimed lives of several people and wounded many others. And this comes as Syrian army units backed by Air Force carried out special operations, killing several militants and destroying supply routes of al-Nusra Front terrorists in the countryside of Hama and Idlib. Meanwhile, Turkey is alarmed as Washington deployed Marines in Syria and pledged to use Kurdish forces in the fight against Daesh in Raqqa. Turkey strongly opposes U.S. plans, saying this will negatively affect bilateral ties.
Hundreds of thousands of people are working without power this morning after deadly storms ripped through part of the country.
There we go.
80-mile-an-hour winds toppled trees in upstate New York. Schools in the region are closed today. In the Midwest, more than 60-mile-an-hour gusts tore roofs from buildings and knocked over trees. Michelle Miller is in Detroit, Michigan, where strong winds fueled a deadly fire. Michelle, good morning.
Good morning. This is what people are waking up to. Winds so powerful, they took down 3-story trees. This one landing just between 2 homes. It even took out part of the sidewalk. More than 670,000 people are without power, and the head of the largest power company says this is the worst weather event for outages he has ever seen. Winds whipped the Midwest Tuesday, blowing roofs off of buildings and ripping trees out of the ground. 60-mile-per-hour wind gusts swept through the Detroit area, knocking out more than 3,000 power lines, demolishing storefronts and uprooting trees. This one even lifted the back of a car into the air. The winds fueled a fire that tore through a Detroit apartment building. 5 people died. 4 were hurt.
We had people jumping out the windows in the back, and fire was being driven through the building by the wind. And so it was a horrendous fire to fight.
I heard this big crack and a boom.
Brad Carpenter's house and car were crushed in Kalamazoo. The Michigan Wolverines men's basketball team's plane was blown off the runway at Willow Run Airport southwest of Detroit. Coach John Beilein says some of the players have minor cuts and bruises.
That game tomorrow has still a lot of meaning, but certainly our kids will look at it much differently.
Michigan wasn't the only state swept up in the wind. Next door in Chicago, 55-mile-per-hour winds broke a building window, showering the street below in glass and smashing this car windshield. And strong gusts made driving a truck nearly impossible. West of Indianapolis, this armored Brinks truck flipped over, killing the driver. In Toledo, Ohio, a tractor-trailer tipped on its side, skidding along an interstate bridge. Another careened off of a highway in Wisconsin.
You've got to slow down so that way you don't put yourself in a bad situation. The worst thing that can happen is your truck gets blown over.